Okay, and now we will begin. Guten Abend from Germany. Good evening. My name is David Patrician, and it is a great pleasure to be back this year again to moderate and host our session, ENAM's Global Outlook 2026. Since a student a few months ago asked me, what does ENAM mean? Just to review, it's the European Network of American Alumni Associations. And we're very excited to come together at the end of the year, and it certainly has been a very, very busy year for us all, to discuss maybe what some people would look at the future for the global outlook of 2026. Just a quick note, this meeting will be recorded, and yeah, we will start in a moment. I wanted to, before we begin with our program, just highlight a couple of important dates on both sides of the Atlantic. Here in Germany, in 1945, World War II ended. So in 2025, we celebrated 80 years or commemorated the end of World War II. In addition, last month in November, the date was November 12th, 1955, the German Bundeswehr, Germany's military, actually came into existence. So this year also marked the 70th anniversary of Germany's Bundeswehr. And again, thank you to all the people serving not only in Germany, but across the Atlantic and the United States and all other members of our community. Also, the United States will be celebrating some milestones. Next year, we have a big birthday celebration. The United States will be turning 250 years old. And I did some research. A fun fact, of course, the Independence Day is celebrated on July 4th, 1776. But it took a few weeks to get everyone together to start the signatures. And the actual signature, the most signatures were done on the date of August the 2nd, 1776. But next year will be, of course, a very big year for the United States. And in addition, on a sporting note, the US, Mexico, and Canada will all be co-hosting the World Cup, the big football, or as we say in the United States, the soccer tournament. So that will be a great way for North America to come together for a great celebration. As I mentioned, my name is David Patrician. I'm originally from the United States. I did a Fulbright scholarship about 18 years ago, came to Germany, and I work for German media now. And I was also a winner of the Amerigo Journalist Award back in 2022. I have the great distinguished pleasure of introducing our four speakers, and for an organizational note, we will have opening remarks from each speaker. I told them a few minutes, but no longer than 5 minutes. After that, we'll have some questions that I've prepared, and then certainly we want to open up the questions to you, our audience, as well. If everything works technically okay, you can go to your chat function, or the Q&A at the bottom, and type in your questions. And if there are any problems there, just go ahead and email them, and then Vincent will go ahead and put that through my mobile. So real quick, I'd like to do a brief introduction. And when I introduce the person, if they can just raise their hand digitally here. So we have Sarah Wheaton. Hello, Sarah. She's from Brussels, and she's the host of Politico's Europe's EU Confidential podcast. And she's also the Amerigo Media Award winner for 2025. So we'd like to say congratulations, even digitally.
Thank you.
Congratulations on that award, and it's fantastic. Welcome. Then we have Aliona Cara-Rusnac. She is currently the Secretary of State at the Ministry of Environment in Moldova. And in addition, she's a former board member of ENAM and also a Fulbright recipient, not once, but twice. So, Aliona, welcome to our discussion this evening.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Yeah, it's a pleasure, great pleasure to get back to ENAM, warm memories.
Very happy to have you. And I know everyone is very busy, so thank you for taking the time. Then we have Muddassar Ahmed. Muddassar is the managing partner for Unitas Global Advisory and board member of Global Ties US, and he's a visiting fellow with the George Marshall Fund's Transatlantic Leadership Initiative with a focus on advancing inclusive leadership. He had a small technical problem with his camera, but can you hear us, Muddassar?
I can hear you just fine. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and my lack of camera is not my reflection on transatlantic relations. I'm trying to get this fixed.
Thank you. But the good news is we can hear you very well. So even though we cannot see you, we're happy that we can hear you and welcome you to our discussion this evening. And we hope the camera situation will be fixed soon. Yes, and certainly last but not least, we have Volker Dankers. Volker, good evening. He's the founder and CEO of the Explore Foundation and also an alum of the CBYX, the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange Program, back in 1987 and 1988. And, that's also, you look at the history, that's 1 year before the wall came down. So a lot happened during and right after the time you were there. Volker, welcome to our discussion this evening.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, and I'd like to start off with our opening statements. for our global outlook with Sarah. But before I begin, there's so much going on. Even as a journalist, it's really tough to keep up with all the events that are going on. Being an ENAM event, we're going to concentrate more on the transatlantic relationship, but we're still open to talk about points, whether it be China, Venezuela, or some of the other hot spots that are happening around the world. But just as a quick review to get us started, we have certain issues, whether it be NATO burden sharing and the defense spending, US pressure on Europe to increase its spending on defense. We've got the ongoing Ukraine war, hard to imagine, in February. It'll be this upcoming February, it'll be 4 years since the war started. And with that, we've got mixed US signals on aid and also a European dilemma on the uncertainty prompted by European nations to rethink this long-term strategy and level of support for Ukraine. We've got tariffs and US protectionism. We've got the governance of artificial intelligence, something that's affecting all the countries around the world, and an attempt for global AI standards to set. And of course, we've also got the rise of right-wing and nationalist parties in many countries, including here in Germany with the AfD party. So those are just some of the issues that we are dealing with and wanted to touch on this evening. So with that, I'd like to start with our first guest, Sarah. And as I said, we say in German, Pi mal Daumen, 5 Minuten, about 5 minutes. But if it's 1 or 2 minutes earlier or 1 or 2 minutes later, that's fine. But in case it is longer, I may have to just interrupt you to conclude it. So Sarah, with that, if you could open up our event for this evening.
Yes, thanks so much, David, and thanks to everybody for being here and inviting me. The thing I'm watching here in Brussels will actually take place starting tomorrow, potentially going all the way into Saturday, which is the gathering of the EU27 leaders. And they are dealing with some foundational questions, both really driven at the core by the deteriorating transatlantic relationship, but that will also determine the ongoing relevance of the European Union. So the first is figuring out how to support Ukraine. The country is basically about to run out of money in the first quarter of next year. And the solution that many European countries hoped they could use would be to essentially create a reparations, they're calling it a reparations loan. It would be taking profits from some Russian frozen assets and giving it to Ukraine to continue its fight, with the assumption that when the war eventually ends, that Russia would owe this money as reparations, and so they'll just kind of give it in advance. The plan came up against objections from Belgium, the seat of the European Union, which is also the home of Euroclear, the financial institution that holds that money. And they're saying, look, we would be on the hook for billions of euros if this plan is not actually legally sound, or if Russia somehow is able to come after it. And Belgium is holding it up, and the longer they hold it up, the more other countries are saying, yeah, maybe this is not such a great idea. Foundationally, the issue is that the European Union is still reluctant to take out joint debt, Eurobonds, to fund this money. And so they're casting around for other solutions. They don't seem to be working. We're really looking at this to potentially founder completely. The other big issue they'll be dealing with is the Mercosur trade agreement with some major Latin American countries. They've been negotiating it for years and years. It's almost at the finish line, but a few countries are getting cold feet, particularly France and Italy, fearing blowback from their domestic farmers, and they're holding it up. Now, the EU was never meant to be a war project. It was meant to be a peace project and a trading body that protects the global trade order in the face of Trump's tariffs. So if they can't agree and get this trade deal across the line, will also really just call into question the relevance of the European Union.
Let me ask you, now, of course, the last year, there's been a lot of challenges with the transatlantic relationship. This is a general question, but how is the mood like in Brussels at the EU concerning the United States? Do they still consider the United States as a dependable partner, whether it be trade-wise, whether it be defense-wise?
Absolutely not. The mood, frankly, is terrible. Just the other weekend, the U.S. National Security Strategy Report came out, and they said basically that they see Europe as a civilization in decline, facing civilizational erasure due to allowing so many migrants to enter, even though in point of fact, they're actually reducing numbers of irregular migrants coming into Europe. And then Trump Trump followed it up actually with an interview with my colleagues at Politico, saying that he sees European leaders as weak. The EU basically seems to have no leverage. They're not involved in these Ukraine peace discussions, even though they would be accepted to sort of continue to maintain whatever peace results. They cannot enforce their landmark tech regulations here in Europe because Trump is saying that he sees this as a barrier to trade for or for American tech companies. And even the sort of broad trade agreement that they signed with the U.S. Doesn't really seem to be going that well. So I think there was a lot of denial and a lot of hope in Europe that, okay, we get past the first Trump term, and then they really hope that Kamala Harris would win, and then they hope that maybe adults in the room would prevent Trump from doing seeing out his full vision, but I think reality is finally starting to set in. Has that recognition of reality about the basically destroyed transatlantic relationship is that resulting in action in Brussels or in EU capitals? Not really.
Okay, thank you. And one last follow-up question for you. We're talking about the global outlook for 2026. I know there are dozens upon dozens of issues, especially with the EU and the United States. Is there maybe one issue that we should keep our eyes open for, in your opinion?
I mean, beyond the two that I just mentioned, I think, the other sort of Trump issue is Trump-related issue, but that is happening all over Europe, is the rise of far-right parties, and to some extent some far-left parties around Europe. Basically, the fall of mainstream centrist governments due to voter discontent. Is affecting capitals around democratic capitals around the world, and we will see how that starts to drive policy. We're already seeing it play out in Brussels with much more right-wing policy and basically a total reversal of a lot of the climate policies that were the hallmark of the previous European Commission.
Certainly very challenging times with that. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to move over then to Aliona. Aliona, of course, Moldova, a bordering country to the Ukraine, so you have a first-hand or first-row seat to what's going on there. Could you maybe tell me a little bit about you and your country's look for the global outlook in 2026?
Thank you so much. And indeed, thanks for interesting presentation and interesting blended and mixed mixture of the speakers that have different backgrounds. So I will speak from my own background. I'm a lawyer, I'm an economist, I worked in the banks, but, international organization, but now I'm working at the State Secretary as Minister of Environment. Since 2023, and I would like to say that I see the things from a different perspective. I see the things from a different perspective as a board member of the Global Environment Fund, of a Global Climate Fund, the National Determinant Authority, and Adaptation Fund. So I see these things, how they are from the perspective of the changing of the movements of the funds. Yeah. Obviously, climate is really important. And Moldova, being a southeastern country that is situated between Ukraine and Romania, makes it vulnerable to the security risks, to the energetic risks, because now we faced in 2024 at the beginning the energetic crisis, where we had to switch all our energetical lines toward EU, being a kind of struggled with the Russian Federation. So that's why the country in a very short time had to switch the entire policies, internal policies. And this is, we're talking about a small country. And now I want to switch from my perspective as a state secretary, as a participant or representing the country at different COPs, like I represent for the first 4 COPs in a row, 3 on the climate change, 1 on the biodiversity. And I would like to mention that the changes are quite tremendous, because since last COPs we were discussing about where to implement and to have more projects on environment, on climate change. Now where all the countries are kind of following US, because US stepping back from all the projects that have the name of the climate change. And now all the projects, even from Austria, they are from Austria, they're stopping their financing. So it's a huge climate change difference in terms of the implementation of the projects, in terms of their, I would say, fund directions, or fund investments. So since US stepped back and now all the funds were cut from the environment or climate change, now everything is shifting for the developing countries. And it's shifting in terms of UN and, it's shifting in terms of the projects and so on and so forth. So lesson learned, we have to learn fast, we have to adapt. And this is, about not only to climate change, but also to adapt to the investments. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very steep learning curve indeed. Aliona, I wanted to ask one or two quick follow-up questions. As you mentioned, with the United States stepping back on its funding for climate change, could this also be an opportunity for someone else, for example, for the EU, to step in with some of that funding? Or is the money not there or the will not there?
It is already happening because, for example, now we have we switched from the some funds from IMF to switch to the growth plan that we are helped by EU. So it is already happening, and the stepping in, the funds by EU, and all the projects that were stopped by US, now they're covered mostly by the EU money.
Okay. And I have another question, and actually this comes from a conversation with Sarah earlier today. She reminded me, of course, that Moldova is on track to joining the EU. Thank you for that reminder, Sarah. And I wanted to ask you, how's the situation looking like? There are certainly many challenges. To name a few: Russia's influence in the region, Transnistria, the conflict there, limited EU support from member countries. So how is the mood like there? Would you say there's still a majority of people that want to join the EU, or right now it's not a big priority with all the other issues going on?
It is huge priority, and as a member of the government, I would like to say that we are competing and speeding up all the processes. We have lots of work to do. The government, the ruling government promised by 28 to join the EU, to have everything in place to join the EU. So that's why now we're aligning all the legislation and everything. Transnistria, well, you know that all the resources were cut from Russia. Most of the resources were cut from Russia due to Ukraine's ban at the borders. They were struggling last year during the winter with the heat, with the energy, electric power. And they had to change their internal policies too, because the government of the Republic of Moldova, we consider it, as a unified territory, because according to the constitution, it involves that territory on our side. It's self-proclaimed territory. So that's why the government helped in case, when it is necessary, stepped in and provided the necessary resources for that region. So we're trying to help them. We're trying to include them in the process of accession because we're discussing, there are permanent working groups and so on and so forth. So we're doing the best to involve. But indeed, I call it green run because you cannot imagine, like, the Minister of Environment has to transpose 2,000 documents. And as a mandatory 200, but this 200 has bylaws, so it's and it's only the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Agriculture, and you have not only to transpose the legislation but also to reform your subordinate your institutions that will implement it. So it's a green run.
Okay, very good. Thank you for those reflections from Moldova. Very good. As we continue our trip around our ENAM group here, I'd like to go over to Muddassar. Muddassar, I saw your camera on for a moment. Is your camera working now or still some issues? Ah, Hello.
It's working now. Wonderful.
Very good.
Hi.
Nice to see you. Hello. Can
Nice
I
to
ask,
see you too.
where are you right now? Where are you based
I'm
out of?
in London.
In London. Okay, very nice. Good to see you and welcome to our
Good to see you
discussion.
too.
Yes, and yeah, we wanted to start off, of course, and hear your perspective with the global outlook for 2026. So the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you so much, David. And I'm sorry about the certain issues I had with the camera. It's good to see the ENAM family again. And many of you I haven't seen for a long time. So, and I'm very grateful for everyone who's put together the effort to put this event together. Now, 2025 has been a very interesting year for the UK. And, you know, I certainly feel that the work we've done this year has left us well positioned and even better for 2026. And of course, I'm speaking about our football team. But but I'm not sure everything else is going quite as well. Now, look, you know, the biggest concern here, looking in 2026, as many of the speakers have touched upon, is the transatlantic relationship. There is so much uncertainty around the relationship, from global tariffs to questioning NATO's viability to attempts at somewhat attempts at peace in Ukraine. One thing is clear, is that it feels that our most powerful friend is seriously thinking about how it wants to treat us. And I think that you know, it's not just about the national security strategy and how it's implemented, but it's also about this whole idea that it seems to be driving policy, which is that many states in Europe will become majority non-European. And essentially, as a result of that, and that ought to affect the values of those states and the civilizational output of those states. And that somehow is a threat, according to the United States, currently within the national security strategy. So this is quite alarming and concerning. And, you know, I'm also quite worried about how we're seeing, you know, many official channels talk about migrants. I'm not just talking about, you know, many actors on far right or on the internet, but actual government actors from across the states talking about migrants and instructing them to begin raising concerns about migrants. And I feel like this shift in views on the migrants, driven by this national security strategy, driven by so much uncertainty in the world and not knowing what's going to happen in Ukraine, puts us up for a very challenging year. And this is not even thinking about any black swan events. You know, I'd be very scared to think about a black swan event. I don't know, China invades Taiwan or something, and where that would leave us. So those are some of my jumbled up thoughts on the topic.
No, very interesting. Let me ask you one or two follow-ups. So specifically that you're now in London and England, 2016 was the year I think that Brexit was voted in, and also the year that Donald Trump was elected president. And do you think now that the UK not being part of the EU, is that actually a plus or more of a negative as far as dealing with some of the issues in the transatlantic relationship?
Look, I've always felt that Britain is stronger in Europe. You know, and I think this is a growing feeling now in the British establishment that, I mean, I think for a very long time, many of us felt that Brexit was an act of great self-harm. And whilst the public obviously, you know, voted for it, but I think opinion polls are now showing that the public would vote for us to go in. I think that the impact on fundamentally, the impact that it had on trust with our European partners was huge, and that trust impacted our defense, our migrant cooperation on the environment, politically, and now you can see on Ukraine and all manner of other things. So yeah, I agree that it was definitely an act of great self-harm.
And also, I wanted to ask your opinion on this because, of course, England and the United States have a very long and cherished history. So when Trump was elected back in 2016, many people said, oh, that's kind of the exception. It'll be there for a few years. And then afterwards, Joe Biden was elected and people thought, oh, we're going back to normal. Then a few years later, Donald Trump was elected again. And I've talked to some people, some politicians here in Germany, and say maybe Joe Biden was kind of the exception, and Donald Trump and the MAGA movement have become now the norm for the United States. Any thoughts that you're hearing over there, especially in Britain, about this?
I tend to agree. I think that Donald Trump is a very consequential president, perhaps the most consequential in living memory. And I think he has shifted the nature of the debate and the Overton window in ways that, some ways will be irreversible. I do think that once you impose tariffs, it's hard to pull them back. I do think that once you begin certain conversations, it's hard to pull them out. And even no matter who the next president will be, I think they'll be living in the shadow of Donald Trump. And I think he's normalized. So I think we are in a new era. Bits of it are scary, bits of it present opportunity, and bits of it, I think it's how we respond. Now, with respect to the bits I find scary is the conversation around migrants and this underlying assumption that demographic change in Europe is some sort of threat. I take personal umbrage as that, given that I'm from a particular demographic. However, I do think at the same time, there are opportunities as well. And we just need to be prepared to have a tumultuous 2026, I believe.
Very good. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, Muddassar. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
I'd like to continue on with our digital floor here and move over to Volker Dankers in Hamburg. Volker, good evening. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And we're looking forward also to hearing a few thoughts of your global outlook for 2026. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think, uncertainty, the alarming developments, that's pretty much what I feel describes the situation on this side. And I think the bottom line is the relationship with the United States, has been seriously damaged. And I also feel it's in some extent probably irreversible. This is damage already done for a generation to fix. Since I'm working a lot with youth exchange programs with very strong focus on the United States, if I may just take you kind of on that route, because we all, have a background here with a strong program that eventually, brought us on this route, whether it's Fulbright or CBYX or other programs. And, what we, had to notice is when the presidential budget came out, Trump pretty much decided or, put out on the floor a 90% reduction of the budget, for the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, which is, part of the State Department. And this, would bring this whole story down to about $50 million, coming from 760 somewhere, and so all programs along the board pretty much would see no funding if this would come through. Now, the good news is the State Department is still there, the Education Bureau is still there, and I think both parties pretty much have felt a very strong wind from within the U.S. and also from outside the U.S. From exchange programs, from people who deal in the field. And I just learned today that in this process, more than 20,000 letters have been sent to congressmen and to just encourage them, to kind of rethink, what is at the horizon here. Particularly keeping in mind that this whole field of studying in the U.S. That's a $1 billion revenue in the U.S. So there's a lot of money behind this, and I guess that had kind of definitely fallen in the right spot. So the message from Congress is pretty much, we hear you. And they came back and said, well, you know what, if we go down to like 700 million, so we still have enough funding to carry on. So Congress is positive, but it's still pending because there's huge issues in the US right now that need first, to be attended to. Then that's the defense budget, that's the health budget. So they expect like in spring to have clarity on this. So when you speak to people in the field, I think we all come to the conclusion there is a new normal. There is a new normal for all of us we need to deal with. And the general feeling, I'm picking up is, yes, we're dealing with it. We feel public diplomacy is still of utmost importance. We want to carry on these programs, and we'll do everything possible. When I look at the German market, the sad news is, the numbers for the US are going down. And I guess it's no surprise because parents obviously, have the choice. And, we expect those numbers to drop significantly. Right now, US is still number one, but Canada is breathing down their neck. And so maybe within the next 2 to 3 years, we probably see for the first time in over 40 years, a very strong shift. And Canada probably will make the race and, take the lead when it comes to student numbers. In general, so I would say programs to the US, to Australia, also to the UK are on the declining side. And it's really Canada, Ireland, New Zealand that are the winners when it comes, to this situation. I know that New Zealand has declared also US to be one of the new target markets. So they want to recruit actually American students for schools in New Zealand, for universities, and for also secondary education. So that's pretty much, what I see right now.
Very interesting, Volker. Can I ask you, since you're dealing a lot with youth exchanges, you said that the numbers are declining for students wanting to go and study in the United States. What I hear in Germany, some parents, there's a long list, but one of the reasons they're worried about visas and complications of, getting into the United States. Is there 1 or 2 issues that you hear a lot about for the reasons that the numbers are declining for students going to the United States?
Yeah, I think it's visas obviously have this year been a massive issue due to the hold up with the new processes, but that pretty much, I guess, has been ironed out. But still, there's new regulations in place now that parents are worried about. What is on my daughter's or my son's cell phone? What Instagram stories has he or she liked? Is there something that's maybe picked up at immigration? I mean, to share a personal story with you, my daughter was due to actually go to the US over Easter. We actually decided not to do this, to have her travel all by herself, a girl 17 years of age, maybe stuck in immigration. And this is a lot of discussions, of that nature we're having with parents. Can you guarantee? No, of course we can't guarantee anything. And so parents actually feel like, maybe we should kind of reroute this whole idea of education abroad away from the US.
Okay. Yeah, certainly a concerning story, but thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. To our ENAM technical team, I did see the message. Apparently there's some questions coming in through email. I would just ask you, the easiest way is if they could put those questions, cut and paste into our chat or Q&A box, or send them to me. You all have my number, and I'll take a look at my phone in a moment. Until then, I have 1 or 2 questions. We talked about social media. I'd like to switch over maybe to AI. And it's a question to anyone. I'll start with Sarah, but if anyone would like to give it a shot here. As the EU pushes forward with stricter artificial intelligence regulations, how might this divergence from US policies impact global competitiveness? And what role could Europe play in setting global standards for AI governance? And of course, as we know, AI is something that's going to truly change the way we work and live. Already is doing so now, but in the next couple of years, dramatic changes are on the horizon. Sarah, maybe a few words from you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big tension there. on the one hand, historically, Brussels has been proud of something that was dubbed the Brussels effect. And this was this idea that Brussels would be the first out of the boat to regulate emerging technologies. And as a result, the rest of the world would kind of need to follow along and emulate those protective approaches. But then, especially, I remember actually last year or at the beginning of this year when I was in Davos, the idea going on was, Brussels regulates and the US innovates. And there was this sort of general vibe that things were going to move more in the direction of the US and that Brussels would even maybe dial back some of its regulations. And indeed, we have seen the EU go through a major tape cutting exercise on many, but especially on environmental measures. Yet there really is a great sort of identity related attachment to the EU's digital regulations, whether those are, consumer and privacy protections or speech protections, basically from the EU's perspective, preserving democratic dialogue by preventing hate speech online, preventing misinformation online. From an American perspective, especially from an American government perspective right now, this is seen as restrictions on free speech. And so with AI, I think we're going to see a similar tension play out if Europe wants to move more in a protective direction or if it's going to be a bit cowed by the Trump administration, which is saying putting too much restrictions on American, because it is mostly American tech, is a trade barrier. And likewise, there is that recognition of why is it always American tech? Because it is much easier for companies of all sorts to come to market and grow in the United States. And so Brussels is wrestling that. But I do think EU citizens do want to see, haven't seen specific polling on this, but my sense is that there is support by EU citizens for Brussels taking a more aggressive regulatory approach on tech. And so my prediction would be that you would see that continue.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a quick roundtable discussion. Anyone else? Would you like to add something dealing with artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I would intervene. And I would
Please.
say as a perspective of defending my habilitatus thesis. So my topic for habilitatus thesis is online contracts, smart contracts. Yeah, so that's why, as academia, I would like to say that digitalization is very important. And even in my thesis, I recommend to give AI personhood. I'm very future visionary.
Very good.
But as a government, I would like to say that it's not so easy. And as a representative of the government, obviously, I would like to say that Moldova is advancing very well. We're advancing in terms of implementation of the digitalization strategies and digitalization of all the processes. Yeah. So that's why, as you see here, digital AI, is playing with the light is the same. It's the same, as we're trying to advance in all the domains. But we even have a disinformation strategy, where it was screened the information that is spreaded with the help of the AI. So basically, it's it's from one side we digitalize all the processes, from another side we actually limit, and we try to put some bans, and to control in a way, because this might have advantages, but also disadvantages. So monitoring, controlling, this is really important. Yeah. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you very much, Aliona. Okay, anyone else on AI? If not, I have already received on my phone here a few questions. The first one, it's a great question. Of course, it's a little bit general, but I'll open it up to the floor. The question reads, how will China affect the world in 2026? Of course, this is a question that I think we could spend hours, if not days on. But in short, in brief, would anyone like to take a stab at this question here? How will China affect the world in 2026? I open it up to our floor. I want to give it a shot. No? Okay. So I see no one jumping in there, which is fine.
No, it's fine. I will jump in.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to say that China has a very active, aggressive way of moving. From one side, they're developing all the technologies. From other side, they're investing in different green projects. Yeah, they started, kind of buying their, their environmental impact by expanding forests and so on and so forth. So, from one side, obviously, we understand, that all the products that are produced by China and, China as the active player on the world arena, we cannot, exclude it. And, all the bans and all the restrictions that are towards China, that doesn't mean that they do not have a progressive way of thinking and very adaptive. And I will use this word. It's kind of my way to, my word for today. And I would like to say that we have mentioned that they created different funds for different projects. Yes, from one side, they're expanding their technologies, production of different stuff, spreading all over the world. From another side, they also are proactive. Especially, they created, I think, a fund for environmental projects. Yeah.
And then can I ask you, because a lot of the disruption that's happening now with the transatlantic relationship, do you think this is something that China is taking advantage of? Do you see some of that on a government level?
As academia, I would like to say yes, but not as a representative of the government.
Understood. Okay. But that's some of the articles I read here in Germany also, where they're saying that this could be an opportunity not only for China, but as I said, for other players, including the EU, to step up in some of the vacuum that's being left.
David, that's why I use the word adaptive. They're jumping in whenever, someone is thinking about strategies, laws, and so on and so forth. They just act. That's the right word.
Very well said, as a true diplomat. Excellent. Good. I see here that I don't see any hands up with China. I'd like to go to our second question. And again, thank you for the questions here. This is open to our roundtable. Cyprus and Ireland are hosting presidency of the EU Council in 2026. What would be the one piece of advice you would like to give them? Oh, also, tough question. Anyone on the panel would like to try on that one? Again, Cyprus and Ireland are hosting presidency of the EU Council in 2026. What would be the one piece of advice you would like to give them? So pretty general. Sarah, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as the Brussels person, the Cypriots are facing a challenge because they just they don't have a big diplomatic infrastructure, and so we're already, for people who are real EU nerds, we're already hearing that the Danes will actually kind of continue to chair some of the working groups because the Cypriots just simply do not have enough diplomats to do it. But I think the Cypriots can lean into their sort of small country neutral position to potentially get some headway on some files. I guess one thing that they're already doing that I think will be very effective is they have increased the number of direct flights between Brussels and Larnaca. There basically were essentially none up to this point, but I think all of us being able to spend the winter flying to the beach to a sunny Mediterranean island will help everybody be in a more compromising, open-minded mood. And yeah, similar advice to the Irish, just, it's there's such a warm culture, and a little bit of Guinness could really help, lubricate negotiations.
Can I ask you a follow-up real quick, Sarah? You had mentioned before the Mercosur trade agreement, and I checked, that's the agreement between Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, and the EU, currently going through some challenges, as you said, with France and I think Italy, posing some opposition to that. My question to you is, how might Europe's recent trade agreements with South America and other regions reshape its economic position and its future relationship with the United States?
Well, that's a bit exactly my point. The Mercosur deal is not signed. And Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is on record that she plans to fly to Brazil on December 20th to sign this deal. And if EU countries don't sort this out basically this weekend, then her trip is going to be off. And the EU also has just had to push back its planned trade deal with India, which it wanted to sign by the end of the year. The EU's power, it doesn't have military power. It does have leverage as a gigantic market. And if it fails to sign these deals, then it will be giving up really its only source of leverage. It declined to use that leverage in its trade negotiation with Trump due to its dependence on American military power. So, if it can sign these deals, then it can, Europe's goal is to be the safe haven for commercial players who want to continue operating in a norms-based world order. They want to market Europe as a stable place to do business. So yeah, if they can succeed in implementing these trade deals, that would go a long way, especially relative to Latin America, with Trump saying that he really sees the Western Hemisphere as the U.S. Domain of influence, but that would allow Europe to continue to have some influence, to continue to push for the climate goals that it still considers to be important, for the labor standards that it still considers to be important. But yeah, will Europe be able to get past its domestic concerns to sign these deals? Still a huge question.
Very good. Okay, thank you, Sarah. I'm looking here. I don't see any further questions. We've got a few more minutes. I think this would be a good time to do our final statements. I will maybe start off with Muddassar. Muddassar, if you're there. The question that I'm going to ask everyone in the panel, and specifically I want to start with Muddassar. If I'm not mistaken, you're with the Unitas Global Advisory. So a big part is looking and analyzing what's happening around the world. Certainly, I'm guessing a very busy time for you and your colleagues, to say the least. But as a closing statement for all of our speakers, I'd like to always finish off with an optimistic note. Is there anything that we should be looking towards? In addition to that, challenges, the list is long. But as a closing statement, when we're dealing specifically with the transatlantic relationship, as I said, we have everything from the midterm elections coming up in November. That's still a year away. That could change the political landscape a little bit. We've heard tonight, too, that no matter which direction the U.S. goes, the damage has certainly been done already. We've got some cultural events, for example, the World Cup, which may help to unify a little bit of Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And that's always good to have North America together. But any maybe observations as we come around to the new year of 2026? Muddassar, I'd like to start with you.
Thanks, David. This has been a very enriching discussion. Thank you for everyone for the points that they've been making. And you've really said a lot of things I would have said. But, I'm looking forward to England winning the World Cup, obviously. That's something I'm very excited about. Yes, finally. But, I mean, honestly, it is difficult to be massively optimistic about anything next year. I think it's going to be a very, very difficult year across the world. I think that the reverberations of not just America, but many of the global conflicts will continue to be felt. But you know what? I still believe in the transatlantic alliance, and I still feel that there is a, dare I say, a liberal beating heart. There is a common decency, and there is enough people on both sides of the Atlantic that hopefully will, make their voices more vocal. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Muddassar. Volker, how about you? Looking towards 2026, any observations or wishes?
Well, I believe that, and that's kind of, what I'm picking up within the industry, we will come to terms with the new normal. We will find a way forward. And I believe that, now more than ever, public diplomacy on all levels, are utmost important. We will keep those programs running, and we will keep these friendships running, and we will keep these relationships running, and we will survive, and we will do it.
Super, very optimistic. Thank you very much. Aliona, turn it over to you. Any last observations or wishes for the new year?
Well, thank you so much. Indeed, I hope that New Year will not bring new crises, new shifts in the whole world, and it will be more stable than before. I think, from, big these events that happened before, we want a more peaceful year to come. Thanks.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you very much. And Sarah, a closing remark from you in Brussels, you could say in the heart of everything. Oh, I'm sorry, your microphone. We have to turn the microphone again on.
How long have we been doing Zoom and still yeah, look, Brussels, as an American in Brussels, I'm always struck by how over the past decade it still is really driven by what's happening in the US. So I think everybody in Brussels will be watching the midterm elections, and to the extent that Brussels has been making progress on having more European autonomy, if they see Democrats retake parts of Congress, you'll see them kind of going back to a bit of complacency again, actually.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for that too. Yeah, and I guess on a closing remark, first of all, I'd like to thank all of our 4 guests tonight for joining us for this conversation. In addition to that, I'd like to extend a thank you to the ENAM team, including Vincent, Jorg, and also Massimo, among others, for putting this event together. I think that we all have been participants and have benefited from these programs, transatlantic programs. And basically, the ball is in our hands now to make some efforts to help this transatlantic relationship. Some would say to repair it. Others would say to maintain it. But I think it's a very important time. And I would like to just say I wish everyone a very safe holiday, whatever holiday you may be celebrating. Ein guten Rutsch ins neues Jahr. We say a good slide into the new year. And that hopefully that we can meet each other in person at some point, and that we have more good news than bad news in 2026. With that, on behalf of the ENAM team, I say thank you very much and all the best. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Good evening.